All right, good afternoon, listeners. You're listening to the Lament of Hope podcast, and I'm here today with Dean Gregory. It's actually a real gift to talk with him. Dean's daughter, who died almost 2 months ago now, Indi Gregory, she was really the subject of a controversy about human life that was in the UK. She was a baby that had a terminally, well, it was said that she had a terminal illness. Um, and Dean Gregory, her dad and her mom, who are engaged, Claire, they were fighting to save her life, to keep her on life support as a means to try and see if there might be some different techniques, treatments that might help her to live longer. And the UK government said no, and that it was in the best interest of the baby for the baby to die. And so she was taken off of life support at hospice. She was not allowed to do so at home. And so Dean Gregory has been talking about this incident since it's happened. And this has actually happened a few other times in the UK with some other children. Um, Dean, just before we get started, I wanted to ask you, um, when did you know something was wrong with Indy? Because she had a mitochondrial disease, and if I understand that correctly, doesn't that mean that cells in her body are not getting the energy they need? Is that what that means?
Yeah, there's about 3,000 different mutations of
Okay.
mitochondrial disease, but yeah, it's basically to do with energy and seizures and the muscle tone in the body. But when Claire was pregnant with Indy, we went for a scan and they said she had a heart defect
Okay.
at first. But Claire's got a little hole in the heart, so we thought, oh, she could just be like Claire, she'll be all right. It wasn't until the second scan when they said, oh, there's some fluid on the brain. Um, so they was asking us if we wanted an abortion. And was like, no, no chance. Well, whatever. I was on online and looking up fluid on the brain, and there was loads of children what had it, and there was fine. So it was just like, no, whatever indie comes out with disability wise, we'll just deal with it.
Okay.
Um, it wasn't until she was 2 months old until she had a. They kept pushing us to have a genetic test um, because she was having seizures. She started having seizures about, I think she was a month old, something like that. And I was reading up on genetic testing, and there was a woman saying that just be careful because as though they can use it for your child or for anybody, they can also use it against you.
Hmm.
Like, for example, you've got this terminal illness, we're not going to treat you. And
Yeah.
I was worried about that happening. And they kept asking and asking and asking. And eventually we said, we can just let Indy have her genetic test. Hopefully it would help her find out what's wrong with her. That's when they found out she had a mitochondrial disease. So she was about, I think she was a month old.
So what you said that they kept asking for you to take the genetic test. Was it her medical team or her doctor or
It was the doctors who kept asking the genetic woman who does the genetic testing to come and have a meeting with us.
okay.
Um, but I was kind of like when you read into it, it's a bit personal. They can see everything about you, and I was worried that after reading about it, um, they could turn around and say, "Well, we're not going to treat Indy."
Hmm.
Um, and obviously that came true. So that's why I was always in the back of my mind thinking we didn't want to get genetic tested, but because she kept having the seizures before, we'll just let Indy have her genetic test. And then when they found out what she had, we just got given a piece of paper. No doctors came and explained to us what it was or anything like that. So we just got handed a piece of paper saying, "Oh, Indy's got this." And then they kept trying to push the hospice on us, even at an early age, like when she was a month and a half, 2 months old.
And they were pushing the hospice because they believed that she would not get better, that there would be no, because it sounded like from what the medical team was saying, they thought it was in her best interest. That's how they put it. for her to die because there was just no way for her to get better. But it seems like you were even offered assistance from the Italian government that they had some new treatments that they wanted to try on Indy and would even pay for her to come over to their medical team. But the UK
Yeah.
still said no.
The problem is when they didn't know India had the genetic result, they said they will give her the heart operation. But as soon as they found out she had that genetic result, they didn't think she was worthy to have it because she might have a potentially smaller life, shorter lifespan. So it was in the NHS's best interest not to spend money just in case, because they didn't know how long India would live for. They never even seen a mitochondrial specialist in the hospital.
They never went to speak to the doctor that was taking care of her, you mean?
No, I mean our doctors was just normal intensive care doctors, but
Oh,
India she had a specialist condition, mitochondrial disease, but we never had a specialist even come to see her.
would they not allow one?
They just never got one to see her. We had eventually in the course when she was 7, 8 months old, we had specialists around the world
Yeah.
saying that with these treatments and if they opened up the valve on her heart,
Hmm.
she could have potentially had a good quality of life. And we had top specialists in her condition
Hmm.
agreeing with the heart doctor, saying that if you give her the stent procedure and carry on with her medication she was on, she would eventually get better. But they just didn't want to know. They kind of, from an early age, to me, felt like she was neglected. The only time she was really, really bad in the hospital was when she caught hospital infections, which was she had E. coli 3 times in the hospital.
Hmm.
And one of the times it turned into sepsis.
Hmm.
So we was with her all the time. She was never suffering. She was never, if she was in agony and in pain and we thought she was suffering, we wouldn't have gone to the courts and we wouldn't have battled. But we could see how good she was getting once she started a ketogenic diet. Then she caught sepsis E. coli, which made her CPR. And so it was the infections kept knocking her back. But for some reason, I knew there was doing something in the background, like trying to build up a case against Indi. And that's what happened in the end. They took us in a room and they threatened us with court. And they said to us, if you tell anyone or put it on social media, then we'll get reporting restrictions on you. It was a doctor and a nurse what took us into a room and said that to us.
Okay, the doctor and nurse at the hospital where she was staying.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, say that one more time. You said they came in and they actually told you that you couldn't post on social media. They were talking about this whole situation or the fact that you wanted Indy to live or
They just took us into a room and said, because there's disagreements on India's future care,
hmm,
basically they didn't want to give her a heart operation. Um, they didn't want to give her a tracheostomy, even though she didn't need one at the time.
hmm,
She was fine. But because there was disagreements, they were saying that the trust was advising them to take us to court. And then
okay.
they said to us, if you post anything or tell anybody, then we'll put reporting restrictions on you. Obviously, and
Hmm.
I was like, you've got no chance.
Now, did you ever think this was going to become what it did? Because I mean, at this point, you've had nations around the world, and then you had Christian Concern representing you in the legal side of it, and you had just a whole bunch. I mean, this became a huge thing overnight. Um, did you think that was going to happen?
And I knew something was happening in the background with the hospital because Indy was obviously having seizures. And then when they found out what Indy had, a condition, they knew that they said there was some treatments, ketogenic diet and some citrate, what helps the mitochondria. After she beat the sepsis, she started a ketogenic diet and then she stopped having seizures. And the doctor says she's pretty much clinically perfect. So for 2 weeks, she had no episodes. And they moved her down to the ward. And after 5 months of being in intensive care. So they moved her to the ward. She was doing great. And then she caught an infection off the ward. Um, it was called the enterovirus. It was like a in the lungs breathing. So she got moved up back into the PIC unit, and then she had sepsis, and they were saying to us they want to bring a second opinion doctor in, and I'm like, well, why would you get a second opinion doctor to come in and see her while she's battling sepsis? And we refused. So I thought it was going to be used against us, even though they didn't say anything like that. In my mind, I just thought it's like they're planning on doing something and they're going to use it against us. So I refused on the Friday. We came back on the Monday to see the doctor, and he said that the trust had advised him to go over our head and bring him in anyway. So they brought another doctor
Hmm.
from the NHS in from Birmingham to see Indi to write a report on Indi when she's battling sepsis from catching E. coli in the hospital, which to me was just like, how is that even fair? Um, so they brought him in, and then they writ the report. And then when she beat the sepsis, that's when she started the ketogenic diet, and she was perfect. She had no episodes. They wanted to move to the ward, and I said to the doctor, can we now bring the doctor back to see her now?" And he said, "No, it will be too much time. It's a day out." And I was like, something's not right here. So something was always in the back of the mind that they was planning on doing something,
Hmm.
even when she was well and getting better.
So you were
Um,
saying that she was actually, when she had the sepsis, that's when they
yeah,
had the NHS official come in. And then
yeah.
when she recovered and was actually, um, because I guess you mentioned that she was in the ward. Was she in the ward twice? Because you mentioned before that she was moved to the ward and that's how she got sepsis. Or did she
No,
move to the ward? I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, sorry, I've confused with it. So she got sepsis. The the doctor, the second opinion doctor came in when she had sepsis.
Okay.
She beat the sepsis, started a ketogenic diet, and then she stopped having seizures. And then for 2 weeks, she had no episodes. That's when she moved onto the ward.
Okay.
But after I think 4 or 5 days on the ward, she caught another infection off the ward.
Okay.
It wasn't sepsis, it was called the enterovirus. It was another virus. And
Okay.
she got moved back up into the intensive care.
But the NHS official came the first time when
She
she had
came the first time
sepsis.
when
Okay.
she had sepsis, yeah.
So
But then
when,
when she was when she beat it, started the ketogenic diet, and she was well, I
yeah.
asked if he could come back to do another report, and he was just saying, "No, no, it's too much trouble. I'll email him and update him," and that was it.
So when did you hear from the NHS again after this incident? After he took the report and then he left? When did you hear from them again?
So she got moved onto the ward. They started talking about um, if she gets well, she can come home and stuff like that. And then when she caught the enterovirus and got took back up to the intensive care, after a couple of weeks after that, we got asked agenda meeting. To me, I didn't know what it was. It just said agenda meeting, India agenda meeting.
Hmm.
So we had to go to this big meeting, and they was talking about India's future care. So they had a solicitor there, or someone from their trust solicitor, or whatever. And then there was me and Claire, and then some of the doctors and stuff. And that's when they started talking about future care and how they don't think it's in her best interest to have a heart operation or a tracheostomy. And they said that they don't think it's in her best interest if she catches like an infection to have CPR or anything like that. And I was like, whoa. I says, surely if she catches an infection from the hospital, then it's not her fault she's got it. So of course you're going to do DNR, like CPR and stuff. Um, and then they started talking about because there's a disagreement in India's future care that they might obviously take us to court.
Hmm.
Um, but that went quiet. We didn't hear anything about it until September. Then they took us into a room at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday, no, on a Tuesday night, um, saying we've had an update and there's a best interest final hearing on the Friday, which was 48 hours away. So I
Hmm.
was like, Jesus Christ, we couldn't believe it. Was before that we never given handed any paperwork or anything. But luckily I had the Daily Mail ready to write the story up because I didn't want to go to court and get reporting restrictions on us. Um, to me, it felt like she was neglected. They just didn't want to try even the known medicines that does help the condition. Was being told that she could only try it for 2 weeks, and I kept saying, "Well, why does she only get 2 weeks?" Then he would say, "Well, what do you suggest? Then 5 years?" And it just didn't add up all the time. It's as though that they just didn't want to spend any money on her, to be honest.
So for you, as this legal battle went on for a couple months of deciding whether or not she was going to be taken off of life support, um, did you, I mean, how did you feel as the dad? Because you're in this position where you really want to protect Indy, you want her best, and then at the same time, your hands are tied because there are people who have more power than you in an official sense who are preventing you from doing that. So how did you feel as you were trying to fight for her, but also having to do so publicly? So you couldn't even really keep it, the emotions and the privacy of being able to have it to yourself. How did you feel as you worked through that?
It just felt surreal. I just couldn't believe something like this could happen to anybody or a family. Um, when they took us to court, they said that Indy was deteriorating. She was on like life support, like blood pressure medications and stuff. And I was like, no, this is another infection. And it turned out, and she, a couple of weeks later, it turned out she had E. coli again. So I was fighting because I know that this wasn't her condition. She's not this poorly because of a condition; it's because of an infection.
Right.
So that made me want to fight. And I've been reading up on previous cases. I knew that these cases were pretty much impossible to win because all I wanted was a fair trial. They wouldn't even let us bring in our own specialist. So it wasn't fair. So I was angry. It just felt like it was set up. We had the Christian Concern trying the hardest and helping us. They never gave me any false hopes or anything like that. They always said that these cases can be tricky, and they still tried the hardest and they helped us so much. It just felt one-sided. We had the Guardian, which is Indi's Guardian, which is Kafkas. It's like a social service to speak for Indi. And then you have the NHS, and then you have me. But it just felt like I was against everybody. They was mates. Whatever the NHS wanted, the judge will just rubber stamp whatever the NHS want.
Yeah.
He wouldn't let us, he wouldn't let us bring in our own specialists. We had top specialists in India's condition from Canada, even saying that if you give her the stent procedure and then carry on with her, because the medication she was on don't just take 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it can take months and months for it to take effect. Then with the heart specialist from Ireland, who said that if you open up the valve, that will help her with her breathing, and then you can focus on her mitochondrion with the medicines. But they just didn't want to know. They just didn't want to know. And then we had Italy say that you can bring Indy for us free. They was going to pay for everything.
Yeah, and they
Um,
made her a citizen too. Yeah.
the made assistants that said she can come over to Italy free of charge, won't cost the NHS a penny. And in my eyes, I was like, well, how can they say no to this? You've got the judge says in the courtrooms that he can't force doctors to do something they don't want to do. But then you've got a team of doctors in Italy who are saying, bring this child over, we'll look after him. But then he still didn't. So that's kind of like contradicting his own words.
Mm. Uh,
So, yeah, sorry.
no, no, no. I was gonna ask, did you, because I know the judge refused to let Indy die at home. She had to go to hospice to die, and you wanted her to come home.
Yeah.
What was that? Did you get to spend the final time with her, or did she die when you weren't there?
So I knew Italy was going to be hard to go over
Yeah,
in because it was refusing. I was thinking, well, worst case scenario, then would like Indy just to come home just in case she did pass away. She'd never been home, so we wanted her to come home. Um, we got forced. They said it was too dangerous and in Indy's best interest to go to the hospice. The hospice was 40 minutes away. Home was 18 minutes away. They said she'll get better care there. The nurses there just administered the drugs. We could have done that at home. She didn't get better care there, so they got escorted from the hospital by security guards and police into the ambulance. So we felt like, what the hell is going on? I had to go in my own car because only Claire was allowed in the ambulance. We got forced to the hospice, and we stayed with Indy. Well, when we went to the hospice, they obviously she was ventilated up the nose,
yeah.
and she had two feeding tubes up the nose. It's called NJ and NG. One's high in the stomach, one's low in the stomach. And when they took the tube out, they pulled the plaster and they pulled the feeding tubes up a good 5 inches. But they had to stick a mask straight on her, so they had to push him back in and stick a mask on her to breathe. Um, the problem is when you move them feeding tubes an inch, you have to have an X-ray to make sure they're in the right spot. So obviously they pulled him up, put the mask on. Um, I think it looked as though Indy passed away quite quick um, because the doctor took off his gloves and said sorry because on the machine it kind of flatlined and there was no pulse. So they all went out the room, and I just couldn't believe it, and I was like emotional, crying, angry. So I got the machine, pulled out the lead, and put the plug back in the machine, and then it came up a heart rate and a pulse. So luckily we didn't because before they went out the room, they was like, "Oh, you can take the mask off if you want," which was helping her breathe.
Mm.
But luckily I refused, and when I put the lead back in the on the stats monitor, it came up. So she was okay for 24 hours. She had the mask on. She was having the nurses just came in to give some medicines, and basically we had to sit in the room with her. We had the kids in the next room, which was like a flat, like a room onto her room. Um, and then they had to because she went to that hospice. They had to ring the same doctors who took her there to talk about her care, and they didn't want to make any changes. But on a face mask, it was really steaming. It was filling up with water. So every often they had to take the mask off to get all the water out. So something wasn't right with her mask. And then the next day, the stats was up and down. Um, and then at the night time, she started struggling. She was kept tense in her stomach. And she had a free drainage bag on. So on one of the tubes, they put a bag on where and when they was putting medicines in, I could see it coming out of the bag. So I don't think the tubes was back in the right places.
Mm.
And she was in discomfort and in pain. She was like tense in her stomach and like she was even. So that's the worst time I've seen her suffer is when she was in the hospice. When she was in the hospital for the past 3, 4 weeks of the court in court, she was pretty much back to normal. But they kept her on ketamine and fentanyl, which was hardcore drugs. I kept asking them to wean her off them because you can have side effects when you come off them and stuff. Then when she was in the hospice, it was about I think, 1 o'clock at night or half one at night, and her heart rate was dropping and her stats were dropping, and she she passed away. I kept plugging in the machine, but it wasn't working. Clear hold of it. So, well, I was that angry with being forced to the hospice. I like gave Indy a hug and kiss, and I got the kids and pretty much said we need to get out of here. So I felt I was that angry and stuff. So at 1:45 in the morning, we got in the car, took all the bags, and we drove home.
I wanted to ask, just to go back a bit, you said that when she first got to the hospice, they pulled the tubes out to put the mask on.
Yeah.
The tubes, those were her feeding tubes. They took them out to put the mask on. What was the mask for again?
No, she had a ventilation. She had the ventilator
Yes, yes.
that it can go in your throat or it can go in your nose. Hers was in
Okay,
her nose,
okay.
but she had two tubes in this nose, the feeding tubes. It was all connected by plasters. So when they loosened the plasters and pulled the breathing tube out, it's pulled the feeding tubes out.
Ah,
Because one of the doctors shouted, "Oh, you pulled the tubes up," and they went up a good 4 inches,
wow, okay,
and just got pushed a little bit back in, and then the mask. She needed the mask on.
okay.
But
So,
when you move them a little bit, you have to have X-rays in the hospitals to make sure they're sitting in the right places.
okay.
Because because of that happened when we went to sign the death certificate. No doctor went to see her, and it just said a heart condition and a mitochondrial disease. It didn't say what she passed away from. So I
Mm,
refused to sign it. I refused to sign it, and we asked for a coroner's report. Where they can just put them in a thing and scan them because we didn't know if her lungs filled up with milk because she was on 24-hour feeds through them tubes. But they refused to do an inquest on Indi.
mm. What do
And
you
massively,
think is it possible then that she could have died from the fact that the feeding tubes were not working properly?
100%, yeah, because I'd never seen her the way she was wrenching and tensing, and then she had a free drainage bag on, and you could see a lot of food coming back out of that. So clearly wasn't going in the right place. That's why we wanted a coroner report, which can be done by just a scan or anything, but they refused to do anything.
Mm.
And to go back to court to get for them agree to it would prolong the funeral and prolong everything, and the chance of them doing anything anyway was very small.
But
But
you
we
had
did
to
ask.
watch all of this as the dad.
Yeah, we had to watch it, and we
That's ex
traumatized us.
Yeah, it's excruciating. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, they sent her there to die, basically. For me, it's like it feels like murder. That's what it feels like.
When it's interesting because I know she recently had a funeral, a Catholic funeral, and I believe in the research I did, you and your fiance were not religious. And then after this happened, you decided you wanted Indy to be baptized and you wanted her to be buried in a Catholic funeral. I wanted to ask you, because a lot of people would go through a difficult experience like this, and they would say there is no God because it's very
Yeah.
painful. And it seems like if there's a God, why is this happening? Why for you was it different? You were like, okay, I do think there's a God. Because it seems like it would be the opposite, but it's a very interesting reaction you had.
The problem is when I got taken to the courts, I had 48 hours notice, and I went down on my own. So I'm going down to this building in London, and you're going down to this courts, and you're dealing with these people. What feels like they're against you, everyone. So it just felt like I was being dragged into hell. That's what it felt like. And and I always thought, what if there's a hell, there's a heaven. And then you've got people like the Christian Concern who are religious people. So the only people helping us was, in my eyes, good people who believe in God. So that's why it felt like this is like good versus evil, heaven and hell. And so I thought, well, so it made me think more about it. So I wanted to basically save a soul and get her baptized. Um, Definitely. I mean, we was as a child, some people are born into religion. Their families will take them to the church
Hmm.
to get baptized at a young age. But for me, we wasn't baptized at a young age. So going through this made me feel like there is a God and there is a devil because it felt evil. It just felt pure evil to me.
And how did it feel? The fact, though, that Indy did not survive. So, in some ways, some people may look at this and say, okay, well, the evil prevailed here.
Yeah.
Like, do you still think God is just, despite the fact that this has happened?
I just in my when Indy had a funeral, I written something for Indy,
Yeah.
and I said in it that I felt like Indy was put on this earth from God as a to expose the evil in the world. She was put on this earth to expose what's happening in our health system.
Hmm.
So that was her. For me, that was her legacy kind of thing to expose what's happening. And hopefully, something comes from this, and it stops it happening in the future.
What is the hope that you have now that this has happened and she's passed away? And you're gonna, you now have living your life and moving on in some ways, trying to live your life and continuing your work and your relationship. Um, what is that? What is your hope right now as a dad with the loss of your daughter? And also
I still
seeing
want,
that the medical team, too, the people that are supposed to care for you in this situation were not caring for you.
yeah. Well, I still think she was neglected from a very early age. I've got evidence of certain things, so I'm still gonna fight for her to try and get justice for Indy um, in a negligence claim because the way they treated her and what happened was was never about Indy's best interest. It was never about Indy's best interest. It was always to do with what was in the best interest of the NHS, whether that's down to costs, resources. It was never for Indy. So I'm going to help the other families once this happened to, and we're going to try and change the law in the UK. So parents have got more rights because it's not until you go to court in one of these best interest cases that you realise you've got no rights as a parent,
Hmm.
and it's not happening in any other country rather than just the UK. And that's why I think Italy and America and everyone are looking at us and thinking, what the hell's that? What are they doing to the children over there?
Hmm. I want to ask, do you think, um, have you considered forgiveness in this because you've been wronged, you and your Claire? Do you think you're going to be able to forgive the people who really have brought this misery upon you? And it's something that, you're carrying this burden for your lifetime.
Yeah.
Um, do you think that's something you'll be able to do?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think I'll be able to forgive them, unfortunately.
It's real. It's hard.
Yeah.
Um, what is something you would say for parents? Because it's interesting, I actually just a few weeks ago did an interview with Terry Schiavo's brother, which was a um, best interest life case actually in America several years ago. Um, how do you think you would encourage just parents as they're hearing this and it's shaking them up? Probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think there is something that you can say or speak to parents with children who maybe have terminally ill, or babies who they say are terminally ill and they're just really discouraged because they think there isn't any hope?
Just need to search around for more help abroad. Um, it was a bit too late for us because the judges wouldn't give us a fair chance. So we was getting all this evidence from abroad and even top specialists in a condition um, saying that we even found two children in America with India's condition. One's 9, one's 8, but that didn't I didn't find them out until the last weeks. So just keep fighting and research, get help from outside. Um, just whatever they tell you, like just don't agree to anything. I mean, get your own evidence and get your own opinions because doctors aren't always right. We get it wrong a lot.
Mm. Do you think,
Um,
I was gonna add too, do you think you and Claire, are you guys gonna continue going to the Catholic Church?
and the church, we've been a few times since Christmas. I will be going back. Yeah, the bishop who done the funeral is a really nice guy. We do plan to get baptized ourselves, me, Claire, and in Vienna. Definitely, yeah, definitely keep going to the church because I feel like Indy's got connection in that church where we had the service.
Yeah.
Um, I also feel a big connection in Italy. We went to Italy just before Christmas. Um, went to an award ceremony, and the people over there are amazing. They gave us an award. They gave us a tour around the Vatican, and that was really nice and stuff. They were just caring and like they was willing to help. Um, but for some reason, our country wouldn't even let it go, even though it was free and it wouldn't cost them a penny. I think it
Yeah.
was. I didn't think they want the embarrassment just in case Indy was going to be okay. They, I think it's just embarrassment for them, and they weren't willing to accept that, and they don't want to break the system because if they let us go, they're going to have to let other families go in the future, and I don't think they want to do that. For some reason.
Have you been able to connect at all with the families whose the previous babies in the UK who've
Yeah,
passed away and similar? Have you connected with their families at all?
I am. Yes. If you can you remember Charlie God?
Yeah.
Um, when it first started happening, I was in contact with his mum, Connie.
Okay.
She helped me. She helped me a lot. Um, and then Holly Dance. She's helped me a lot. I think that was Archie Battersby. It was his mum. So yeah, I've connected with a couple of them.
Was that encouraging or helpful?
It was helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had some good connections and good advice and stuff, which really helped.
Good. Well, is there anything, before I end, I want to ask you, is there anything you would like to say to the listeners or anything that you think is pertinent that you want to repeat?
Just that obviously the injustice Indy served. She never suffered. She suffered in the hospital the most when she had infections,
Yeah.
and that's why I was always fighting for her. And in the last weeks, they said she deteriorated. She got diabetes insipidus, and I've been researching myself with sepsis or any sort of E. coli bug. You can get diabetes insipidus, and that went. Um, Indy got she had bad stomach, was losing a lot of stools. They said that Indy's bowels was failing, and 2 week, I think it was a week later, we went up to the ward, and half the ward was closed off because there was a sickness and diarrhea bug going around.
Hmm.
So just there was making all these excuses and saying that this when we first went to court, they said she'll only live 2 weeks. The court case lasted over 2 months, and she was getting better. But they still did what they did because it was just inhumane, evil. Um, and I just think it's just disgraceful what they did, to be honest.
Mm. Well, listeners, again, you've been listening to Dean Gregory. He's the father of Indi Gregory, who passed away about 2 months ago. For a, it's a very interesting case, and I highly recommend researching it. The Christian Concern has several good articles on it, um, and you can follow what happened and the details of that. But Dean, I wanted to thank you so much, and I appreciate that you took the time, especially right after the holidays, to talk about this again.
That's fine. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.